Hi, everyone. Joey Reese here with the Practice Center, where we talk about all things mindfulness, forgiveness, and attitudinal healing. It's been a while since I've made a solo video. So I wanted to get on here and talk a little bit about connection. I've been having a lot of personal conversations about connection and disconnection. I know I use that word quite often, the importance of connecting to ourselves so that we can connect with each other and then the greater world. And sometimes when you talk about something enough, it almost starts to lose meaning. Have you ever started saying a word and it starts sounding weird in your mouth? You're like, is that even the right word? So for me, that word connection is so important and so integral to what I think I'm doing on this planet that sometimes it's good to take a pause and revisit the definition and revisit exactly what we're doing in order to facilitate this thing called connecting. The importance of making sure that we're using words correctly, I think, is really important. I am currently reading Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown's new book. And one of the things that I love most about her books in general, this book in particular, I really noticed it this time around, is that she takes time to clarify and define common words that we use all the time, every day in regular conversations, and how sometimes we're misusing those words. And so defining them has been really important. So even in the simplest words, take a moment to really define for yourself, and then maybe the person that you're having a conversation with, because a lot of times we can get into arguments or miscommunicate because we're using the same words, but we're not using it in the same way. So connection. So before I get into kind of how I facilitate that, I want to talk about the other side of the problem that I'm noticing. Even in here, we make disclaimers like, this isn't therapy. The work that we do here at the Practice Center is not therapy. It feels therapeutic because we're talking about stuff that's important to us and people are listening, and we have this emotional connection to the stories that either we're sharing with others, therefore we feel connected to them, or we're able to witness other people's stories. So that sense of vulnerability is what allows this feel therapeutic, but this isn't therapy. And then I'll tag on something like, although this feels good, it might be really supportive to you to go seek therapy or seek a therapeutic relationship or go to counseling. There is this element of me pushing you to connect with others. The more I think about that, I am two minds about it. That recommendation stands. I think I will continue to say that forever. That recommendation stands. There is value. I believe it in wholeheartedly. I think it's really important. I also find it hugely problematic. I myself have found being in therapy to be some of the scariest moments of my life. Being forced into therapy as a young person. And in the way that we used to talk about it before, perhaps things have changed. I have not witnessed a whole lot of change, especially when it comes to our kids. But the way that I experience therapy is that my family has singled me out as the problem and that I'm going to go get fixed from this outside stranger. And this outside stranger didn't give two shits about me. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. Sitting there, it felt like an inquisition. Like, where's the bright light? And why don't you just question me on why I'm such a shit? Like, that's how it felt. So, and as a result, it, my performance in that therapy meant that either freedom or incarceration for me. I was going to go back into lockdown, or I get to be free to live in this home with people who thought that I was the problem. So there was a no-win situation. Therapy felt like a sentence. And since that time, I haven't had terribly great results with one-on-one therapeutic relationships. But there was a moment in my life I was pregnant with my third and final child, my daughter, who is now 22. So that's a long time ago. When I was pregnant with her, I was losing it. And finally, I found this therapist. He was a Black man. Oh, the first like person of color that I got to work with. It was a Black man. He was kind of an old school guy. He always wore his monogram shirts. You guys remember when monogram shirts were a thing? So he had like crisp monogram shirts with that crease down the front of his pants. He was like a put together kind of guy, like by the book. But I don't know how long it took. I found solace there. I remember like going in once a week, but I had to fight for it. Like my insurance didn't want to cover it. They wanted me to go get medication through a psychiatrist. And so like to find like a 10 session therapy, I had to go through hoops. So the barriers, man, I had enough space and enough awareness and knowledge to navigate that system. But man, that's a hindrance. Okay, so finally I get there and I'm able to lie on this couch, and I don't know if I ever talked. I cried a lot. I cried. I just sat, I immediately went in. He would hand me tissues and I would just cry and blow my nose and cry and then probably talk. And the only thing that I remember him telling me, and I'm not sure where it was in the session, he's like, Joey, you're like bamboo. You guys have heard me use bamboo imagery in my trainings before. This is where it's coming from, Dr. Pearl Varner. He says, Joey, you're like bamboo. He's like, all the things that you've been through, this is what you're doing. This is why you don't break. And then you come in here and cry. And then you go out and live your life. If you were stiff, you would have broken, but you're not broken. So you're like bamboo. He didn't say it like that. He was very like matter of fact and very controlled and contained. I wonder about him. I wonder what he's doing, where he is. But yeah, that felt really good to me, but it was a short little moment in this long life that I've been living. But generally speaking, when I say the word therapy, it doesn't feel good in my mouth. And then when I think about like 800 numbers, and if somebody's coming to me for me to give them an 800 number, it's like, but I could have in that moment connected with that person, right? But immediately we're kind of trained to, oh, you're talking about suicide? Here's an 800 number. Talk to somebody who's trained. I think there's space for that. There's value for that. And I'm incredibly thankful for the people who had the foresight to know that we live in a disconnected world where people don't have people to turn to and talk to and feel safe. And so to have this person, anonymous person who's willing to get on a phone and stay with you is powerful. And we should continue to use it. So yes, I'm a proponent of that. And also, if I am the person who this person is coming to, I want to have enough space. I want to feel enough peace within myself. I want enough room so that I can hear your pain and hear your story without interjecting my own pain and yes-anding you. Yeah, I want to be able to sit here and just listen. We have, I think, a world run amok with people who just want to talk. In fact, there's a lot of people in my life that I think about, I know it doesn't matter what I start saying. It can be the most dramatic trauma inducing story that's happening or just a story. There are people who will be like, yeah, and then you know what happened to me? They will never ask about you, or they will never say, tell me more. They will never say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling you. They'll just want to talk. So to those people, I want to say, I get it. I get it. And also, you're not using that time as wisely as perhaps you could. So know when it is time for you to share your story and when you need to be heard. And also know when it's time for you to shut up and listen. Those are the two components of connecting. Yeah, that's vital. Even before we do that inside work of don't give advice, don't be judging, right? All of those kinds of things that we can get to. First and foremost, know when you need to talk. Don't save it up until you're in the presence of somebody who needs you to listen. Recently, I had a teacher friend tell me about some general testing that came in at the high school where he works. And he was sharing with me that some of the regulating skills have gone up in students as they've been having to do distance learning, spending a lot more time on their own. Their ability to kind of self-regulate has increased, but their connection scores have decreased. So the components of being able to connect with others is that we have to have some willingness for vulnerability, right? But if we've been isolated for all of this time, if you've been remotely working and you've only had to deal with, you know, this kind of one directional kind of Zoom thing where you could turn off your camera, where you can kind of fake it until you turn off the camera, that idea of vulnerability might even feel more scary than it was pre-COVID. So just think about your sense of willingness to be vulnerable. That means emotional exposure for you to say, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm confused, I'm conflicted, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah, your willingness to share the stories that go with those emotions. Just consider your willingness to speak on that. But on the other side, consider your willingness to listen. So if we are able to then listen and not go, oh yeah, me too, you know what happened to me? So not one-upping them. Notice then your like ability to actually hear versus fix. When somebody's telling you their problems, are we like so scared that we might want and will and force upon this person your desire for them to be okay, to say, oh, it'll get better. Oh, you know, all of the cliches, all of the platitudes that we're going to throw at somebody. Those aren't helpful and it doesn't facilitate connection. What facilitates connection is for you to shut up, like I already said, we already talked about that. Take a deep breath and then practice saying things like, tell me more. And then come back into your own body to receive. You don't have to keep all that you hear, but to receive and let go, receive, feel, let go, receive, feel, think, and let go. But letting go of their stories, to know that they're not yours to hold on to, might give you a sense of safety while you're listening. Sometimes we think we have to take on somebody's pain, take on somebody's problem, and then solve it for them. That's not yours. It's not your job. You're not their savior, right? But to really listen means tell me more. And then even if you're able to say things like, seems like you're really sad. That's it. You don't have to fix that sadness. You don't have to have solution 1, 2, 3, and for them to try. Yeah. Connection just means that two people have their hearts open enough to share at least something meaningful, right? And that we're trusting the one to speak and we're trusting the other to listen. And maybe sometimes it's going back and forth, but to really be present for whatever's happening in that moment is really important. Some of that might need practice. You might need practice. You might have been good at it when we were having to do it more often, right? But now you might be like, oh, I haven't had to really engage in like regular life conversations like this in a while. That's one of the benefits of attending a workshop. That's one of the benefits of practicing in like a container where there's a facilitator and people who have kind of rules of engagement and some principles to follow. We practice there so that we can go out and utilize the tools that we've learned a little bit more naturally, a little bit more fluidly. Yeah, it's really vital. It's really paramount that we practice these things, practice vulnerability, and then go out and do that. Also, the other benefit is you have a lot of pent up stories, right? In the midst of like a global pandemic that really has life altering impacts for many, many poor people than I think. I don't mean poor people, like many people than I think we are able to take in at times. And then wars, and then like everything in between that's happening. We might think our stories in our personal lives, our interpersonal mishaps and the fights with our spouses and your kid getting on your nerves, like those might be small things. My fight with my mom or my siblings or this little tiff here or there are no big deal because we're judging them against these huge global impacts. It's really important for us to recognize that our suffering is our suffering. And we can do something about that. But we can't do anything about that if we're pretending that we're not suffering, right? So know that your stories are important, and then know that there are skills that we can implement that'll help us be heard. And know that you, without any additional training, without getting a degree, without being a therapist or a counselor, you can indeed help somebody heal by just listening and feeling with them, knowing that you guys aren't both going over a cliff together. Yeah, and that might be good enough in that moment. And then maybe offer, hey, I know this really good therapist and they have space, right? Or here, this 800 number. And I have friends who answer 800 numbers. It's really a beautiful thing. So really hear me when I'm saying both and. But today the conversation is about connection, yours and mine. And if we forego that opportunity for us to connect, and I'm sending you to a third party without handing you off, like that gentle, that soft handoff, then dare I say, we might have missed an opportunity. So what is your willingness to connect? What is your willingness to vulnerability? And how are you practicing it? And then how are you utilizing that in your life? That's what I'm curious about today. That's what has been on my mind. That's how I'm steering the conversations in my personal life lately. So I hope you think about it. I'd love to hear your additional thoughts or questions. This will be one of our topics of conversation in our live segments that we're attempting to try, called Express Yourself, where we're, taking coffee, drinking it, talking in the mornings. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just on here trying a bunch of different things and seeing if any of this can be helpful. Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you for continuing to come back. Thank you for referring your friends and family. We really appreciate your willingness to work on this with us, to practice this with us, because it's going to take all of us in order to make any kind of meaningful, like, global change. And I really feel like it's possible. So there. See you soon.